All right, in this lesson, I'll introduce some arithmetic methods and kind of tie a few different concepts together. Hopefully, by the end of the lesson, you'll look at Ruby and its methods in a slightly different way. Before I begin that, there is some housekeeping that I have to do, some little things that I want to add on to some of the concepts we introduced in previous lessons. The first is about our method calls or our method invocations. In the past, we did something like 1, which is a fixed num or an integer, and I did next on it, and we got the result of 2. This is called a method call. We are calling the message next on this object. Method calls can be followed by a pair of parentheses. So we can write this like this with the opening parentheses and the closing parentheses, and we're going to get the exact same result. The reason this is important is because in other programming languages, not Ruby but other ones, the parentheses is always required after any kind of method that you call. So some people are a little bit surprised if they're coming from other programming languages that this is optional in Ruby. It is optional, but it is allowed. So you can certainly do it. There is nothing technically wrong with this, but the community standard, the popular one, is if you have a simple method like this that doesn't take any inputs. We'll get into inputs in just a second. But if you have something simple like this, usually the parentheses are left out. They're exactly the same with or without, but usually they're left out. I just wanted to show you that that is allowed. Now, when do we typically use parentheses in Ruby? We use that when we have methods that take what are called inputs or arguments. An input is basically something that we give to a method that allows it to perform its operation. And this will make sense in 2 minutes. I just want to redirect us one more time and just offer a quick review of some of the arithmetic syntax we've explored before. Then we'll tie it back to these similar arithmetic methods and show you how these inputs can work in practice. So just as a quick review of some of the mathematical operations that we've covered before, we did addition, we did subtraction, of course, we did multiplication with the asterisk, we did division, both with integers and with floating point numbers. We also did the modulo or modulus, which returns the remainder. So 10 modulo 3 is going to give us a remainder of 1. And we see all of those outputs to the right, nothing new here. Well, here's where Ruby gets really, really interesting. All of the things you see here on screen, all of the operators here, this percentage or modulo operator, this slash, this asterisk, these minus signs, and the plus sign or the plus operator, these are all behind the scenes really just methods that we're calling on the objects here. In this case, these are all methods that we're calling on the numeric object that's right in front of that symbol. So when we write 1 plus 2, what we're really doing behind the scenes is calling a method on 1 that basically has a name of the plus symbol. So I can write something like a dot here. Remember, our dot is our dot notation, which indicates that we're about to call a method on our object. In this case, the method doesn't have a name like next or a name like odd or even with those question marks. Instead, it simply has a name of plus. And all that we do here when we're doing the plus 2 is giving that method what's called an input or an argument. So some methods like next, which we just saw, don't need an input because they know exactly what they're supposed to do. However, if we want to tell a number that we want to add something to it, we obviously have to specify what we're going to be adding to it. That's our input, that's our argument. So if I write something like 2 here, and I execute this, and let me just put a puts here so we have some separation, we can see here in the top 2 results that it gives me the exact same operation. So whenever you use this shortcut in Ruby of 1 plus 2, behind the scenes what Ruby is really doing is calling this custom method on this fixed num object and giving it an argument of 2. And the same rules apply for any other of these mathematical operations. For example, 10 minus 5 is the same thing as taking a 10 object, which is a number or an integer or a fixed num, and using a method that is basically the minus sign. That takes an argument or an input, which is the number you want to subtract from that. And if I put something like 5 in parentheses, we're going to get 5 and 5 right here as well. By the way, this is, I know, a lot to take in, but Ruby actually, whenever you give arguments or inputs, even though a parentheses I consider to be best practice, again, it's not best practice when you have nothing, no arguments, no inputs. However, parentheses are not required, period, in Ruby. So if I want to do something like 10, use the dot to call the minus method, and then just write 5 out afterwards, That's also legal, that's also allowed. Now you might be saying, why the heck would I use this syntax right here when this one right here on line 7 is a lot cleaner and simpler? And you'd be absolutely correct. I'm just showing you some of the technical features of Ruby and how it works. We'll review and go back on a lot of these concepts a little bit later. I just wanted to give you a quick introduction to them right now. For now, I'm just going to stick with the parentheses. I think it's a lot simpler for people who are coming in from other programming languages. Similarly, if I go down below here, and I take a look at 3 times 4, that's really just the same thing as calling the asterisk method on a integer here, in this case 3, and giving it an argument of 4 or an input of 4 so it knows what to multiply 3 by. And here we're going to get 2 results of 12 from those 2 lines on lines 13 and 14, exact same thing. Predictably, the exact same thing holds true for division. So if I do something like P10, call the method with a dot /5, we're going to get the exact same results here. Let me break that up again so you can see it. There are the two 2's right here. And the same holds true, of course, with floating point division. So if I do P12.0 dot /5.0, you can see we're going to get two 2.4's right here. All right, now here's where it gets interesting. Division is one of those special cases where we have even another additional method that we can use, which is just the div method. So it's kind of a verbal way of doing the exact same thing. But instead of writing the /, we can write div, D-I-V, which is short for divide. And that's just another method that's available on an integer, much like next is or class is, except div, of course, takes an argument. In this case, I'm just going to give it the exact same one, which is 5. And we're going to get 2 here again. So these 3 lines are basically the exact same. They're all basically performing the same functionality. These are 2 different methods. This is the / method, if you will, that doesn't really have a verbal name. This is the div or divide method. And the same, by the way, would hold true for the floating point numbers right here. You can certainly try it out on your own when you have the time. And finally, let's conclude with modulus. Of course, modulus returns the remainder. Here we have a remainder of 1 when 10 is divided by 3. And of course, we can do 10, call a method with the dot syntax, provide the parentheses, which is literally the method name, and then we can provide an optional set of parentheses where we give what's called our argument or our input. We need to know what 10 is going to be divided by for this operation to return us back the remainder, and you can see that we have no problem here. We get the exact same results. And just like there is a complementary div verbal method, there is an actual modulo method. So if I do 10 dot, again, to call a method, and the method name here is modulo, I can open my parentheses here because this method can accept or does accept an input, and let's say I give it 3 again, you can see the result is always going to be the same. So again, all of these syntactical options yield the exact same result. So hopefully this has gotten kind of the brain juices flowing when it comes to seeing everything as an object in Ruby and understanding that everything really is simply either an object or a message, kind of a method or a communication that we're sending to an object that tells it to do something. On the front end, we write a simple expression like 1 + 2, but behind the scenes, Ruby is basically taking a 1 object and simply calling a method on it called plus that accepts an argument and performs the exact same calculation for us. Granted, in real life, you're not going to be using syntax like this in your code, but the real key takeaway here is more about the structure of Ruby and understanding that object-oriented design, getting a great sense of that, and it's pretty simple when you think about it, just objects and methods. Getting a better sense of that design will help you as you proceed through the upcoming lessons in the course. So that's a quick introduction to arithmetic methods in Ruby.